What's up, guys? David Gordon here. I originally intended, after I did my expose on Church Militant and some of the scandal that took place there, to just step back and step away from that controversy altogether. I wasn't using it exploitatively to try and, garner clicks on some cheap content. I prefer to take the high road on it. But I actually saw something recently that made me consider doing this video and ultimately prodded me to do this video. Brian Holdsworth put out what I find to be an obnoxious, low information video, kind of almost dunking on Church Militant and warning people to stay away from any Catholic media outfit that should dare report negatively on events in the church and the culture. And, it deserves a rebuke because it's actual disinformation. And this is why, really people who are going to say things in the Catholic world need credentials. Brian Holdsworth has a marketing background. He's not a theologian. He's not a student of theology. He's a guy that does marketing, that might like to keep up to date on like Catholic news and events, whatever. But he said a bunch of stuff in his recent video on the Church Militant controversy. Why do we need to hear what Holdsworth has to say on this whole controversy anyway? Like, he's not a part of it. He has no special knowledge about what happened at Church Militant. He has no special connection to my former organization. He's a complete outsider. He's not friends with members of my organization, as far as I know. He's just giving his complete ignorant opinion. It reminds me of the Dave Chappelle joke where he's like, on 9/11, like the news channels had on Ja Rule to give his like impression of what took place on 9/11 and to kind of give people comfort. And Dave Chappelle's like, why are they putting Ja Rule on? Who cares what Ja Rule has to say? I don't need to dance. I'm scared over here.
Stop worshiping celebrities so much. Just don't pay attention. I remember right around September 11th, Ja Rule was on MTV. That's what they said. We got Ja Rule on the phone. Let's see what Ja's thoughts are on this tragedy. Who gives a f*** what Ja Rule thinks at a time like this? This is ridiculous. I don't want to dance. I'm scared to death. I want some answers that Ja Rule might not have right now. You think when bad shit happens to me, I'll be in the crib like, oh my God, this is terrible. Could somebody please find Ja Rule, get hold of this so I can make sense of all this. Where is Ja? God, me Ja Rule.
That's the sort of thing that is happening with Holdsworth. Like, I don't need to hear from some rando about what happened in a very particular set of circumstances. A very particular fact pattern. I just don't need to hear what Holdsworth has to say about it. He is completely ignorant of the facts. He doesn't have a scoop to give you guys. He's just talking out of his butt. He knows nothing. The world is a worse place for hearing what Holdsworth had to say just now. So I don't know why he thought it necessary for himself to step out of the shadows and kind of give his take on it. Like, no one cares, dude. No one was sitting around like waiting like, what does Holdsworth have to say on this whole issue? I just really need to know what Holdsworth's take is on Church Militant. Like, I don't care. Go market something, Holdsworth. But let's see what the church says about people like this who are engaging in like theological commentary and in usage of social media in the Catholic world that have really no basis for being there, no training. The Pontifical Council for Social Communication says of guys like Brian Holdsworth in its document, The Church and Internet, that those directly involved in media, it hardly needs saying that they must have professional training. But they also need doctrinal and spiritual formation, since in order to witness to Christ, it's necessary to encounter him oneself and foster a personal relationship with him through prayer, the Eucharist, and sacramental reconciliation, reading and reflecting on God's word, the study of Christian doctrine, and service to others. So if you're going to be out there, like, theology is the only place where people go and like bloviate and appoint themselves as experts with no actual pedigree or credentials, which is weird to me. Like, if you don't have a degree, go spend the $40,000, get your master's, get your PhD. They pay you to get your PhD. But don't just set up your webcam and start pontificating as if you know stuff when you don't. And that's really, everybody should do that. I wouldn't want to hear somebody giving medical advice that's not an MD or a health professional. I wouldn't want to hear someone talking about chemistry or biology unless they had some kind of pedigree in chemistry or biology. Why do people think they can wade into church events with no credentials and just, I guess they figure they can fake it until they make it or something? I don't know. But what he was saying about Catholic media is just wrong. He's essentially saying the entire field of Catholic media, whether he likes it or not, he's essentially saying it's detraction to report on things that are happening that are negative in the church. Because while he was dunking on Vortex, he was essentially assigning all kinds of bad motives and essentially saying that the field is per se disordered, which flies in the face of what Pope Francis actually said on the matter. Pope Francis says this in an address he delivered. He said, "Today we are in great need of journalists and communicators who are passionate about reality, capable of finding the treasures often hidden in the folds of our society and recounting them, allowing us to be impressed, to learn, to broaden our minds, to grasp aspects that we did not know before. I am grateful to you for your effort to recount reality. The diversity of approaches, of style, of points of view linked to different cultures or religious affiliations is also a wealth of information. I also thank you for what you tell us about what goes wrong in the church, for helping us not to sweep it under the carpet, and for the voice you have given to the victims of abuse. Thank you for this." So, what Holdsworth is doing is complaining about the whole, essentially, approach of reporting what's going wrong in the church. And that's not a tenable position as a Catholic. As you can see, it flies in the face of what Pope Francis says to us. And between the two, reigning pontiff or some guy with a marketing and branding background. I wonder who I'm going to pick. Yeah, I'm going to go with Pope Francis on this one. And we're going to go through some of the documents of the church that just absolutely refute Holdsworth's, banal, trite, kitschy nonsense. His whole approach. It's totally skewed, and I think it's a really poor taste to try and dunk on my former organization because the scandal of, one man and the ineptitude of its board. Before I get into that, though, guys, let me ask you, and all you know me, you know that I detest grifting online and whatnot. I've put up videos about it, but because of the circumstances of my departure from Church Militant, which was completely unexpected. Remember, I was a top high-performing employee there in management, and then I was unceremoniously dumped because I essentially took on the role as, an informal whistleblower. If you're ever going to support me on Patreon, please, now is the time. I'm in a bad place right now until I get, another job. So please kindly support me on Patreon if you enjoy my content. Second of all, as you know, the group of employees, there were, I believe, 8 of us that essentially were terminated or resigned on last Friday, so about a week ago. And, none of those guys got severance. They are all scrambling to find work. Please, if you have the means, do kindly support us. This is a rough time. It's hard to get a job right around Christmas. Everything closes down for the holidays. Those of you who are in the business world understand that. It's basically a shutdown for the next 3 weeks until January 2nd, and we're all scrambling to find work. So if you could, please find it in your hearts to support us. Okay, that said, and I'm going to put a link to my Patreon and to our group fundraiser in the show notes. That said, let's go through church doctrine on what the media, what it does. Does it enjoy the favor of the church? Are you allowed to be an investigative journalist? Obviously, we've already seen what Pope Francis has said on the matter, but let's go to some other stuff. See if Pope Francis is an outlier before we address, Brian Holdsworth's saccharine low information video. So let's go. This is Communio et Progressio. on the means of social communication, which is written by the order of the Second Vatican Council and approved by Paul VI. He says this: the total output of media in any given area should be judged by the contribution it makes to the common good. Its news, culture, and entertainment should meet the growing needs of society. The news of something that has happened must be given, and so too must the background of the event, so that people can understand society's problems and work for their solution. Okay, interesting. It sounds like, the church is smiling on reporting on society's problems because it's a necessary thing in order to work for their solution. Let's keep going, though. That part of the Catholic press, which is of general interest, publishes news and opinions and background articles about all facets and problems and worries of modern life. This it does in the light of Christian principles. And it goes on. It is the task of the Catholic press to balance, to complete, and if necessary, to correct the news and comments about religion and the Christian life. At one and the same time, it will be a glass that reflects the world and a light to show it the way. It will be a forum, a meeting place for the exchange of views. This press needs talented men and funds if its professional competence is to be above dispute. Going on, Catholics are encouraged to read Catholic publications regularly. Naturally, these must deserve the name of being Catholic. It's hard to see how people can keep in touch with what is happening in the church without the Catholic press. Neither can people keep a Catholic attitude towards what happens in the world without the help of commentaries on the news written in the light of Christian principles. Let's go Vatican II. Vatican II put out a document, Inter Mirifica, and it says about the media, about the press. The first question has to do with information, as it is called, or the search for and reporting of the news. Now, clearly, this has become the most useful and often necessary for the progress of contemporary society and for achieving closer links among men. The prompt publication of affairs and events provides every individual with a fuller, continuing acquaintance with them, and thus all can contribute more effectively to the common good and more readily promote and advance the welfare of the entire civil society. Therefore, in society, men have a right to information in accord with the circumstances in each case about matters concerning the individuals or the community. Okay, so you have a right to information that would affect the common weal, that would affect the common good, period, end of. That you can't just take a dump on the Catholic press or on reporting as if it's all detraction or calumny, which is what Holdsworth does. We're going to get to that in a second. Let's continue with Inter Mirifica. Let's see here. First, a good press should be fostered. To instill a fully Christian spirit into readers, a truly Catholic press should be set up and encouraged. The press is encouraged. Such a press, whether immediately fostered and directed by ecclesiastical authorities or by Catholic laymen, should be edited with the clear purpose of forming, supporting, and advancing public opinion in accord with natural law and Catholic teaching and precepts. It should disseminate and properly explain news concerning the life of the church. And that would include scandals, by the way. And maybe that's what Pope Francis was alluding to when he thanked people for not letting things be swept under the rug. That would include scandals. Moreover, the faithful ought to be advised of the necessity both to spread and read the Catholic press to formulate Christian judgments for themselves on all events. Skipping ahead a little bit. It is quite evident what gravely important responsibilities, and I'm paraphrasing here, Catholic newsmen have in the present day when they are in a position to lead the human race to good or evil by informing or arousing mankind. The public authority in these matters is bound by special responsibilities in view of the common good to which these media are ordered. Catholic media is ordered towards the common good. The same authority has, in virtue of its office, the duty of protecting and safeguarding true and just freedom of information, a freedom that is totally necessary for the welfare of contemporary society, especially when it's a question of freedom of the press. Okay. And now this is the Pontifical Council for Social Communications, the Church and the Internet, which I've already cited when it called for those involved in Catholic media to have training in doctrine, and to have, pedigree and not just be guys who appoint themselves to sit behind a camera and bloviate at an audience when they don't know really what they're talking about. Okay, so it says this. Vatican Council II said members of the church should disclose to their pastors their needs and desires with that liberty and confidence which befits the children of God and brothers of Christ. In fact, according to knowledge, competence, or position, the faithful are not only able, but sometimes obliged to manifest their opinion on those things which pertain to the good of the church. Like the faithful writing commentaries or covering in news things that pertain to the good of the church, scandals in the church, problems in the church, corruption in our pastors. That's something we have the ability to make known to our pastors in the church. And it's something, that's Canon 212, but it's also something that we're told in Lumen Gentium in Vatican II. Communio et Progressio remarked that as a living body, the church needs public opinion in order to sustain a giving and taking among her members. So the church needs journalism and editorializing and commentaries in order to sustain her own health. It's a good thing in the church to have commentary and not all just patting each other on the butt and telling each other how great everything is and being deliriously optimistic. No. Sometimes, a lot of times, you have to report on what's negative and what needs correction. Okay. It continues. Although truths of faith do not leave room for arbitrary interpretations, the pastoral instruction noted an enormous area where members of the church can express their views. The proliferation of websites calling themselves Catholic creates a problem of a different sort. As we have said, church-related groups should be creatively present on the internet, and well-motivated, well-informed individuals and unofficial groups acting on their own initiative are entitled to be there as well. So, while there can be some issues with things, with organizations that are not officially affiliated with the church doing news and commentary, it's something that such groups can in fact do. They just need to do it in accord with Catholic morality. And if some of them are out there saying kind of un-Catholic things, think LifeSite, e.g. LifeSite, e.g. like the Remnant, then yeah, that's problematic because you have false shepherds leading people astray. But if you're doing it and you're trying to do it the right way, well, hey, more power to you. There's a place for you. And the church says that that's all right. Okay. So that's some of the doctrine to guide us. So clearly the church smiles on journalists. The church smiles even on uncovering corruption and darkness and exposing it to light because ultimately it's a service for the common good. That's very clear on the face of the teachings we just read. That Catholic journalism, Catholic news is something that is a service to the common good and a service to the church ultimately. And it's something that's to be commended and not frowned upon. But listening to Brian Holdsworth's low information shtick, which he put out there, it's like, dude, you don't even have anything to say on this. You're not citing anything except for yourself. You're misusing like the words detraction and calumny because you don't know any better. I even saw somebody in your comments knows more than you, and they're like, the very worst. I mean, a lot of what you're saying Church Militant was doing was contumely, but not detraction or calumny. Anyway, it was a low IQ take, and just kind of jumping on board to say something about the news cycle when you really have nothing to offer. You've done a lot of people a disservice, and maybe you're making them feel bad about reading things or listening to things that expose corruption in the church. And you shouldn't be doing that because, as Pope Francis has said, that is a service that Catholic outfits are in fact doing to the church when they expose corruption. So let's go through some of his points just so I can disabuse you guys of this. But maybe as a preface to that, I think I've expressed my opinion on the excesses and defects of the Vortex and of the approach of certain examples of Church Militant's content. Yes, there were problematic elements, but that doesn't tarnish the whole organization. Yes, Vortex was often done as a correction from justice as opposed to a correction from charity, which Aquinas says that if you do not have authority over somebody, you cannot correct them out of justice, but you can correct them out of charity. Too often, Vortex was done with a tone and a demeanor that it was like, I'm correcting the bishops, the shepherds of the church, out of a sense of justice, like I have power or authority over them and I can scold them. Whereas it's the opposite that's the case. Obviously, there is a structure and a hierarchy to the church, and me, as a layman, I'm at the bottom of it, and so is Michael Voris. And these are our shepherds, and we have to respect them and love them because where the bishop is, there is Christ, and that is the teaching of the patristics and really the whole church. You know, Christ says it himself. He who rejects you rejects me. I don't reject my bishop, and sometimes it's not a pleasant task when I do have to say something like this was not done properly in this diocese. There is this source of scandal there, but I don't revel in it. And I would say it as a son to a father. Too much, too often, the Vortex and some other examples of church militants reporting was done harshly, not as a son to a father, but seemingly out of a scolding tone with, you know, this sense of correcting out of justice in an undue sense because we have no authority over those overseers. You know, that's what bishop means, that Christ has put above us, our shepherds. So we're correcting out of justice and not out of charity. Yeah, there are problems with that. There's certainly problems with that. But this is a nuanced take. This is, yeah, we're exposing corruption, but it still has to be done the proper way. So there's the substance of something, and then also the means that by which you do that thing, or by which you cover that substance. And both have to be correct in order for an action to be correct. Obviously, intent, means, and ends all need to be good in order for an act to be good. So although we might be telling the truth about a story, we can still have a disordered take because we're doing it by the wrong means. We're achieving telling the truth through the wrong means, or, you know, with kind of a savage edge to people that we owe filial love, reverence, respect to. And obviously that is something that can be called out about the church militant method, and hopefully, you know, that can be honed in the future. And other organizations, other Catholic media organizations can hone their approach and learn from the mistakes of church militant. Also, it appears that church militant has falsely reported about people, rashly reported about people. So, sure, that's calumny. You can't do that. And it looks like we owe certain people, John Allen from Crux, Austin Ivere, an actual apology for publishing about them false things that were later shown to be demonstrably false, and that you can look into whether it's, well, I don't even want to go into it. I don't want to go into the reports because I don't want to give them any more teeth. But it looks like we owe certain people apologies. Needless to say, although it is a service to the common good to expose corruption, you know, you have to do it truthfully. You can't expose corruption that's not there. That's called being a tabloid. That's called being a rag. That's Church Inquirer, you know? That's the Rome Inquirer, which no news organization should be. You know, you have to tell the truth. Sure, expose rot, but do it, you know, telling the truth. You can't expose false rot, needless to say. And apparently that's what was happening far too much. We weren't vetting our stories carefully enough in some regards. Now, that doesn't say that the entire organization is missing the mark. It doesn't say the entire organization has no good, solid, responsible reporters working in it. And that's also what Holdsworth's take makes it seem like. You know, that church militant is just the vortex, or it's just the most egregious episodes of the vortex. Church militant did a lot of good for a lot of years in reporting things that no other place would touch. Now, like I said, that's subject to my previous critique that all exposés must be done, especially of our shepherds, in filial reverence and love, out of a sense of charity and out of a sense of wanting the best for the bishops and not just wanting to expose them or be derogatory about them. But nevertheless, you can't judge the whole organization by the sins of a couple of our most egregious or errant reports. There are a lot of good people there, and to speak about the entire organization as if it is the most hyperbolic and improper toned episode of the Vortex, that's just, boy, I mean, talk about using a hammer when you need to use a scalpel for a critique. I was there, and I feel betrayed by Michael Voris about the stuff that came out. And I'm still not just, trying to dunk on my former organization. I'm calling things out so that it can be fixed, maybe eventually. Maybe so that the incompetent board steps down and lets competent people take over. But Holdsworth comes in and just tries to smash it with a hammer and really, negs, slanders, calumniates a whole bunch of, there are a lot of really solid employees working behind the scenes there that are faithful Catholic men that were doing everything that we could behind the scenes to rein in excesses and deficiencies and to make the organization better. Basically, Holdsworth's take rules out any kind of Catholic journalism ever. And that's just way too broad. It's painting with way too broad of a brush, and it does all journalistic outfits a disservice. All right, so some of Holdsworth's awful points. Number one, just essentially, by virtue of being a Vortex video is detraction and calumny, and therefore is more concerning than the double life being lived. Well, that's not true. A lot of Vortex videos just were spot on. Reporting news and saying what should happen with regard to that news, giving news and then commentary, calling out corruption that took place in a particular diocese, and then asking for a redress of that corruption, and asking that whatever has happened that was a disservice to many of the faithful in, say, a given diocese where there was corruption, that disservice be remedied. That's perfectly legitimate. The fact that, and I agree, there were times when we got things wrong and we said things that were maybe exaggerated or untrue, or again, in a tone or a tenor that was not reverent and respectful for the bishops. Yeah, that stuff has to be reined in. If we ever falsely reported things, and we did, apparently, never something that I was involved with knowingly, because of course I would have nixed it if that had come across my desk. But if we're in times involved in falsely reporting something, yeah, that's problematic. But that wasn't every Vortex episode. This is just, again, painting with too broad of a brush. Saying that every Vortex is detraction and calumny? No, that is calumny, Holdsworth. That is a low information, low IQ take, because you wanted to wade into something that you don't know anything about. And I think he even says in the video, oh yeah, I don't really watch Church Militant. And why are you criticizing? What do you know then? Like, be quiet. We would have been good without your take. Now you've waded into it, and now you're going to get owned. Holdsworth says it's more grave to report on somebody of public standing due to the fact that it could hurt them more. That's just false. That's just pure ignorance of Catholic moral theology. No, it's much worse if you're a newspaper, and our libel and defamation laws in the United States actually reflect this. It's much worse to report on a private individual, because there's less of a connection to the common good generally when you're reporting on a private individual. But you can even report on a private individual even though they have a heightened expectation of privacy. Somebody who's a public official has a diminished expectation of privacy, and therefore it's generally much more licit to report on things that they do. This is just ignorance. Here's Heribert Jonet, Guide to Moral Theology, page 251. Newspapers may publish crimes that are publicly known in some locality or which cannot long remain hidden. In the interest of the general welfare, they may also search out and publish the secret faults of one who is seeking an official appointment of which he is unworthy. They may likewise publish and criticize the faults that public officials commit in the exercise of their office, and historians may record the crimes of living persons for posterity, and they may reveal the faults of the deceased, since history should prove a tutor of life and a corrector of evil. And there's more. I mean, look in any moral theology guide. It's all going to be basically the same. The Catholic Encyclopedia entry on detraction also says that for the common good, you can especially report on the misdeeds of public officials. It's all over the place. He's just ignorant. He doesn't know any better. They have more to lose. They also affect more people's lives. And the common good demands that when a public person who has a great effect on many people's lives in his orbit, it demands that information be released so the individuals who are affected by the public person can be kind of washed or protected of his scandal. So Holdsworth doesn't know what he's talking about. Let's see here. Vortex was about exposing things for the public's curiosity. I mean, this is rash judgment, for one, at the very least. It's also a wrong take. It's imputing evil where there actually isn't evil. No, the Vortex was about exposing things that needed to be exposed for the health of the church. Reporting on Theodore McCarrick, for example. Yeah, that wasn't about public curiosity, Brian. That was actually about exposing something that was harming clerics in the church and creating a lavender mafia in the church that was undermining seminaries. It was undermining the teaching of the faith because we're getting faithless clerics ordained who aren't in fact going to teach the faith robustly because they themselves don't believe it and they're there for ulterior motives. Are you kidding me? Like, Vortex was about exposing things for the public's curiosity? No, we all would have objected to that. We wouldn't be in this line of work making like pennies on the dollar for what we'd be making elsewhere if it weren't that we all have an interest in the health and life of the church. We love the church, and that's why people are in Catholic media instead of me like practicing law. That's why I was doing it. I used law to get myself through my theology graduate program. I didn't just go into this to get rich, because that would be stupid, because I am not, in fact, rich. So we're here about truth and the health of the church, because we love Holy Mother Church and want to protect her. And one of the best ways to protect the church from scandal is to expose scandal so it doesn't stay hidden and fester and create deep wounds within the church by, like I said, if you're getting faithless clerics into the church and into positions of power as pastors, that's going to trickle down to their flocks and poison their flocks. We're here for the health of the church. And to say that the Vortex was about exposing things for the public's curiosity is a gross distortion, and you owe us all an apology. He says if you're reporting things week in and week out, you're eventually going to do it unjustly. What? Or, you could have journalistic ethics and not do it unjustly. What is this foregone conclusion that if you do something enough, you're eventually going to start to do it for the reasons of a scoundrel, for self-serving reasons, for nefarious reasons, for sinister reasons? What is that? That's not true. It's like saying anything. Oh, if you play enough basketball games, eventually you're going to start doing it for an unjust reason. No, that doesn't follow. You're just ascribing to people evil motives. So, wash your mouth out with soap. That's not right. You're wrong. You owe us an apology. If you do something long enough, the chances are you could end up sinning, but that's not like a given. It's not an absolute given that if I make enough podcasts here, I'm eventually going to start doing it for a wicked reason. That doesn't follow necessarily. You're rolling the dice. You're taking a gamble. You're guessing, and you are making your prognostication into something that's a foregone conclusion. It's just wrong. Okay, so let's see here. Church Militant, Holdsworth says, he goes on to say, justified what it did by saying it's admonishing the sinner. What are you talking about? You think that Catholic media organizations who report on scandal are doing what they did just to admonish the sinner? And therefore, He applies what seems like a private fraternal correction analysis to church militant reporting through mass media on the sins of like clerics or prelates. So it's just a straw man. It's false. Church militant justified what it did by saying it's admonishing the sinner. Wrong. We need the Trump gif, the famous Trump debate gif. That's not right. Church militant did what it did. It reported on things, not to admonish individual sinners, although that is a side benefit, but that's not the primary motivation. The primary motivation was to shine a light on dark corners of the church that needed exposing so that the church could police itself. Theodore McCarrick, if he were allowed to operate under the cover of shadows and darkness, would still be operating. Because no organization can effectively self-police. You need somebody to shine a spotlight on things to get rid of rot. Fresh air and sunlight is a great disinfectant. And all organizations need transparency, need fresh air and sunlight. And that's what Church Militant was doing. It was helping the health and vitality of the church by exposing the sins of errant churchmen. And that's a really important thing. It's a service to the church. Again, see Pope Francis. Don't listen to Brian Holdsworth. Listen to the Pope. So he completely strawmans that. The secondary purpose, it could be taken to be admonishing the sinner. And then he says it like that's also a bad thing. Because none of what these people were doing were private sins, by the way. If you're having like a double life or creating certain sins, performing certain sins, when you are serving as a public official or as an official in the church, that information it can be used, first of all, publicly to call you out publicly because you're not discharging your office properly. But you can also be rebuked for that, on a private level. But he uses this private fraternal correction thing as if it's just like some private citizen who maybe has like a bad habit of telling tall tales or like looking at pornography on his own computer. And it's not somebody in the public eye. It's not somebody who's forming public opinion. It's not somebody who's discharging some official duty to society, whether civil or ecclesial. He uses that example, which is completely not appropriate for the circumstances that, he's applying it to, because Church Militant really doesn't cover private actors. It's not like we're talking about our next door neighbor, like, the Bill Jones family or whatever, and exposing private sins. We're talking about people in the public sphere, in the public arena. A lot of times people who are serving as church figures, churchmen, prelates, and it's a completely different moral analysis. Now, it's justified because it's in the name of public good that certain sins be exposed. Yet Holdsworth says our main concern should be correcting the individual. No. Our main concern as members of the church, in particular, remember, the church is a corporate thing. There are many parts in the body of Christ. All of us together make up, the mystical body of Christ, mystici corporis. And so our main concern is not correcting the individual. Actually, the main concern would be rooting out the cancer that is destroying or sickening or corrupting the body of Christ. That is our main concern. And that's why something like excommunication is warranted in part and parcel of church law. And it's something that's biblical if you go back to, like, 1 Corinthians, 2 Corinthians with Paul. Excommunication is cutting off the deceased member so it does not, or the infected member, so that it does not poison or destroy the rest of the living body. No, it's not just about correcting the individual for his own health. Sure, do we want the lost sheep to return? Of course, obviously. But the church is a corporate thing, and man himself is a being that's meant for community. We're not meant to live in isolation. This is not like Protestantism, where we believe in this completely personal relationship with Jesus Christ that is, mediated by no one, and that we're not answerable or accountable to members of the church. That's why you say in the act of contrition, I've sinned against you and your church. We are we can expose and admonish sinners because they're poisoning the body of Christ, because they are creating scandal for neighbor, and not just destroying their own salvation, but destroying the salvation of others. And so, yeah, that doesn't actually have to be the case, that we must admonish the sinner by exposing things for his own benefit. Wrong. Again, wrong. No, you can do things for a corporate benefit. And rooting out scandal is going to redound to the benefit of society and the church, ultimately. So, bad take, Brian Holdsworth. Public scandal can be corrected publicly. That's just a fact. If you are a churchman and there is scandal in your diocese, then you can call this out in a public way. And this is just Jonah. I'm going to read to you. This is page 84 of Herbert Jonah's Moral Theology Guide. Quote, immediate denouncement is permitted if the fault is public or will soon become public, end quote, or if, quote, the common good or good of another requires immediate manifestation of the fault, end quote. So you can call out public things publicly. You can call out public faults publicly. So, that's something the Vortex would also do. If somebody has taught something in error, if there is a dubious teaching from a bishop, and again, this is subject to correcting in filial charity, not fraternal charity, because we're sons of our bishops and priests. They are our spiritual fathers, subject to filial piety and filial reverence. Yes, you can absolutely say, this is a bad take. Bishop Barron saying that there is a chance that all men are saved. I believe, based on the face of Scripture, that that's a very poor take, because the way is wide and easy that leads to destruction, and many find it. Those are the words of our Lord. I think that you can make a vortex and criticize that point of Bishop Barron. Now, should you do it in a way that's dunking on our spiritual father? No. And Bishop Barron knows a lot of theology. So, we should do it in this conversant, dialogical way, where it's not just, maybe he's citing some church father that I'm not really privy to. Maybe he's citing some deep theological argument. I still think he is wrong. But, at least we can engage and, dialogue with filial reverence to this person. So absolutely, you can call that out, though. You can say, Bishop Barron, this seems to be wrong. This seems to be offensive to pious ears. This seems to be warranting of a theological censure. But, it's certainly not some point of scandal to call that out. Rather, it's for the public good, the common good, and ultimately, if a pastor or a bishop is errant, it's for his own good. So he says, Holdsworth also says, we must go to the sinner ourselves to try and convince him to live a better life. No, we just saw that that's incorrect. Things that threaten the common good can be called out publicly. Immediate denouncement is permitted if the fault is public or will soon become public. You don't get to have like a public platform and speak error and then not be called out publicly, be called out privately. And it was funny when Taylor Marshall was doing this and saying the Pope is a heretic. And then we go and you're like, you're just wrong, Marshall. You don't even know what heretic means canonically. This is just theological ignorance. Then people are like, well, why are you saying this to him publicly and not privately? Because he just said to his audience of like 500,000, the Pope's a heretic. You don't have to call him out privately. Good heavens, you guys. Like, read a book. So, yeah, you don't have to go to the sinner yourself to try and convince him to live a better life when it's a public official doing something, or it's when somebody has done something that's erroneous publicly. Wrong. Again, wrong. Okay, next Holdsworth point. When you report on some negative action someone is taking, the only way to interpret it is that it's for your own ego or benefit. What? No. That's just not right. So again, that contradicts everything that we heard that the church actually teaches on what it means to be a newsman or a reporter or a journalist or, some Catholic commentator. All of those kudos and props that the Pope and Magisterium was given to us, apparently Brian Holdsworth just disagrees. And he thinks that whenever you are going to report something negative, which again, Pope Francis commends because it helps the church to police itself, it must be for for the reporter's ego or benefit. That's essentially rules out all investigative reporting. Under this rule that apparently Brian Holdsworth has created out of thin air because he wanted to have some take on the news cycle, so he forced himself to put out, a low information podcast. According to him, all investigative reporting, all investigative journalism, all commentary is going to be wrong that reports a negative action that someone is taking because it's for your own ego or benefit. You're just, contrary to the catechism, which says you are supposed to look at what people do and interpret it in the best light, to avoid rash judgment. He's saying that if you're reporting on something, it's not because you want truth. It's not because you care about the corporate health of the church, the health of churchmen in the aggregate. No, it's because you are an egomaniac who, wants self-aggrandizement. That's the gospel according to Holdsworth. No, that's wrong. Again, apologize, dude. This is a horrible take. He says you don't bludgeon people with the truth, but truth must be accompanied by charity. Well, okay. Yes and no. First of all, truth is charity. All these attributes that are ascribed to God, because the divine essence is one and undivided and simple, all of the attributes of God are one and the same thing. So truth is justice, is charity, is mercy, yada, yada, yada. So to draw a line between truth and charity is stupid. It's stupid on its face. It's theologically incorrect. But okay, fine. Fair enough. You shouldn't have truth that is uncharitable, because then it's like having some virtue and lacking some virtue at the same time, which in, the theological calculus there is fuzzy, and maybe I can't articulate it right now. But yeah, you're having some vice kind of mixed in with whatever virtue that you're showcasing. So yeah, truth and charity. I'm not saying you get to say what is factually correct, but in any way you want. We just nuance that, when you're critiquing the bishops, when you're asking for a redress of some grievance, you still have to do it in the right way. You still have to do it and be moved by love when you're doing it. Because again, like Jesus says, if you pray and you pray in a public place for your own aggrandizement, then, you haven't done anything good at all. If you pray out of vainglory so that people will think better of you, you're actually sinning. So yeah, intent, means, and end. They all have to be good. And if one of them is disordered, the entire act is disordered. Fair enough. But we can make these distinctions without throwing the baby out with the bathwater, without saying you can never do investigative reporting because it's bludgeoning people with truth. And if you watch his video back, that's what he's basically saying. He is literally ruling out all investigative reporting. He's literally ruling out all commentary that isn't, sappy and saccharine like his commentary is. Basically, if you actually talk about something that's real and gritty that's going on in the church, that is not something that, is starry-eyed optimism and just about all the happy stuff on the surface, but you're actually probing some of the corruption and rot that lies hidden, then you are not being a Christian. You're bludgeoning people with truth. It's a bad take, and he needs to recant this right away. He then says the snake is eating its own tail. Church militant employees are now doing this to each other. Now we're trying to distance ourselves from church militant. No, I take no pleasure in doing the expose that I've done, and talking about these things publicly. Quite the opposite. I felt betrayed and really angry when I put out my little expose video on church militant. But I did it in a sense out of service for the actual organization that I dedicated years of my life to being an employee at. It was not just something where I'm trying to absolutely destroy Church Militant. It's calling attention to problems that are systemic with the organization in hopes that they can be fixed. And I know that, including myself, many other employees who would return if they could right the ship, if they could fix certain things, if it could get a new board of directors that knew what it was doing, people would go back and fix those problems and work on repairing it internally. So it is nothing that we're just trying to destroy the organization. Quite the opposite. By shining light on what's going on there and what happened there, we're trying to help the organization. We're trying to say these are the things that would make it effective and that would let it enjoy the divine tailwind that it actually enjoyed for a certain amount of time when it was trying to be more faithful, when it was towing the line of fidelity much more carefully. No, we're not trying to dunk on each other. We're not trying to eat our own. That's a really uncharitable take, again, by Holdsworth. And I think he needs to recant that. What he just said is, it's grossly wrong. Coming out and saying that there's these certain betrayals that are taking place or that have taken place and that there was this double life, that's because people have a right to know what they're investing in, what they're putting their money in. Donors have a right to know the nature of the problems of the organization that they're cutting fat checks to. Also, if we are going to be bringing back a person who is living a double life and telling fairy tales to the public about what made them step away in the first place, and they're coming back with some of the problems, the internal problems, the spiritual problems that led into the double life and that led into their wrong-headed, unfilial tenor, the sinful tenor with which they approached ecclesiastical problems, that would be a huge disservice, and that needed to be exposed for the good of people who might be listening to this in the future, so they're not misled or scandalized by certain voices coming out and taking aim at the bishops in a really, contumacious way. Unfilial, contumacious, aggressive, uncharitable way. People have a right to know what's going on and to be able to kind of do the analysis themselves and kind of psychoanalyze, well, why is this person acting like this? Is this a person I need to be listening to? So it was a public good analysis, and this was done at personal expense, by the way. So for him to come out and say the snake's eating its own tail and employees are just scrambling to point the finger and blame each other and to dunk on their own organization, that's completely wrong. This was an act of service to Church Militant. It's ultimately an act of service to Michael Voris himself to call this out. It's an act of service to our donors, and it's an act of service to our listeners, and it came at great personal expense to me. So you guys need to knock it off. Anybody who believes that Holdsworth lie, and Holdsworth needs to recant that. Implies Church Militant is just about denouncing people. He also says that, basically. No, Church Militant, if you read its mission statement, is about protecting Holy Mother Church from slander and attack and about evangelizing people using the video medium. So, wrong, Holdsworth. And we produced a bunch of really edifying, good content also. We just did a Bible study on Ephesians. We've done a whole bunch of faith-based investigations and just exegesis on Scripture, theological discussions. We produced a whole bunch of very edifying content, articles on the nature of the Holy Eucharist, and rebutting attacks from Protestants and atheists on the faith. So we've done a bunch to put out edifying content. We've put out a bunch of content that makes people closer to our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, and to essentially look at Church Militant and all of its work product, and you can see that on the website, in the most negative light like this, is sin against truth. That's a sin against truth. That's a sin against charity. That's calumny. It is reckless. He lumps the entire organization together. Again, I think there's a lot of problematic personnel at Church Militant, especially now, But there were also a lot of really good personnel at Church Militant who were just completely orthodox, faithful sons of the church who are wanting to dedicate their lives to serving Christ directly in this media organization and who are using their talents to purify it and to make it something worth watching, worth clicking on. And to lump us all together is despicable. Yeah. He says it's embarrassing for faithful Catholics like Holdsworth that Michael Voris fell. But the fact that one person falls or lives a double life makes me embarrassed just because I'm a Catholic? No. There's scandal, sure. There are problems in the church. There are clerics. There are prelates. There are laymen who are not living up to the call to perfection that Jesus gives us. And he says, be perfect like your Father in heaven is perfect. We know we're all transgressors and guilty before the Lord. That doesn't mean I'm embarrassed, like vicariously embarrassed to be a Catholic. I don't even believe that. I think that is such an insincere thing to say. No, it's bad that Voris fell, and we should all keep him in our prayers. And, hopefully he can get back on the right path, living the good Christian life. Hopefully he repents. Absolutely. That's fine to say, but say you're embarrassed because someone else sinned. It's disingenuous. I don't buy it for a second. Yeah, I'm angry. Am I angry about this? Am I angry that ultimately my boss's sin in the final analysis cost me my job and my livelihood? Yeah, I'm real mad. I'm real mad to be out of work right now by Christmas. That's not good. But embarrassed, give me a break. You know what I'm embarrassed by? I'm embarrassed by that Holdsworth is doing collabs with schismatics like Kennedy Hall. I'm embarrassed by his low IQ, low information takes on Catholicism, all set to Gregorian chant. That's what I'm embarrassed by. But I'm not embarrassed that one person has sinned. It's not good. We should pray for their recovery. But to say, yeah, it's embarrassing for faithful Catholics, give me a break. Don't go find a replacement for Church Militant now that there's a vortex vacuum, Holdsworth says. That's kind of one of the things he closes on. Well, no. There is an absolute need for investigative journalism, for investigative reporting, for newsmen to be faithfully covering, yes, even negative news about the Catholic Church. That's an absolute need. Pope Francis himself says it. So yeah, you should go find a replacement for Church Militant. You absolutely should. Now, the replacement hopefully can make some tweaks to improve on Church Militant. Hopefully it can report everything that Church Militant was reporting, but fact check more carefully, vet sources more carefully, make sure to never slander anybody, and to report on the negative aspects of what's going on in the church in a tone and air of filial reverence, with a love for our shepherds, not some antagonism towards our shepherds rooted in a deep childhood wound. That would be the wrong way to replace Church Militant. But how about we, perfect Church Militant and make Church Militant what it's set out to be? A news organization that focuses on, Catholic things and defending the church. But sure, a Catholic media organization that is utterly faithful to the magisterium, that loves its shepherds, that reports on what needs to be reported on in a spirit of filial piety and reverence. And yes, uncovers dirt where there is dirt, but takes no satisfaction in it. Doesn't rejoice in dirt for the sake of uncovering dirt, but only rejoices in its investigative journalism for the sake of helping the church to be a healthier place. And yes, giving commentary and theological rebuke to people, to prelates who are saying things that are in error. A filial rebuke as a son to a father. Those are things to aspire to. Absolutely, if you can find a replacement for Church Militant that does those things, you should find it. Because there will be a vacuum. There will be a vacuum. For too long in the Catholic world, too many members of the establishment media were absolutely blindly goose-stepping along, pretending that everything was fine, when there were things that it took, like the Boston Globe, to report on. We should not be whistling past the graveyard in Catholic media. Catholic media has a duty to disclose and to probe where there is corruption, where there are nefarious things happening in the church, in certain dioceses. It's an absolute service to the church. And again, hearkening back to the words of Pope Francis, to find those, to report on them faithfully and filially, but to report on them and to expose them to the light of truth, to the light of day, so that people can call on their pastors and make known their concerns to their pastors in accord with Lumen Gentium in Canon 212. That is absolutely a good thing, and it's to be commended. And Church Militant was filling that role, although it was doing it imperfectly. It did have a role, which is why I believe Providence smiled on it for a certain amount of time until we stopped towing the line of fidelity to the extent that we needed to. The Catholic media was not doing a good job of helping to police the church, and therefore there was too much rot. Church Militant stepped in and did that imperfectly, and it did it, there were excesses and deficiencies, and I'm not excusing those, but there was a service that was provided by Church Militant. Now, in the, quote, vortex vacuum that Holdsworth references, it's time for a Catholic media organization to step up, and I admire what the Pillar has done in many respects. I think they're doing good work. I think a lot of what National Catholic Register, what they're doing is good work. It's time for more organizations to step up like that and to fill that vortex vacuum. And, it'd be great if Church Militant could reorganize and get rid of some of his systemic problems and be a leading voice also in that regard going forward for the good of Holy Mother Church and all for the greater glory of God. Holdsworth, your program was embarrassing. Recant, repent, apologize, and just be quiet.